Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take. We are going to talk about treating climate anxiety, so don't go anywhere. Hello, Carrie.
Hello, Josh.
You got to figure out different ways to
say two
Yeah.
words.
to work into it. Yeah.
Okay.
We started something. I'm like, now I got to do this every
Now
week.
it's going to have to stick. It's
I gotta come
okay.
I like it.
Repetition is okay.
I know. I'm going to do it the same way every time.
Good.
All right. Well, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back. 2 in a row.
I did really like David last week, having him
Yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one, he was super. I think he could have probably just talked the whole time, and I mean, it's like he had tons of
Yes.
information.
Yes.
But I also had a lot of questions, so I asked him to come back, and I think we're working on a time to come back, so
Yeah.
we can do kind of a
Part 2?
right, yeah, which
Good.
would be the third podcast we've done on polygraphs. But I think this one, the idea I have, will really kind of round it out.
Good.
So I'm hoping to get that scheduled. But today we have a unique topic we're going to talk about, which is climate anxiety. And before I get into talking more about that, so I'll give everybody the episode breakdown in just a second. I want to talk about the housekeeping things real quickly that we go over on every episode. So if you're not new to the podcast, you can just zoom on past this because you know exactly what I'm going to say, which is if you're not watching this on YouTube, go over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. And try to hit that like button too, because apparently that is supposedly supposed to help the algorithms. Because I've noticed on YouTube videos now, a lot of people are just asking people to hit the like button instead of subscribing. So I don't know, but that would really help us out. Also, if you're listening to this on the audio platforms, if same thing, head over to YouTube, hit the like button. But also just stop what you're doing just for 1 second and go and give us a 5-star review, especially if you like it. But give us a 5-star review and then come back and finish listening to the episode. So it takes like 1 or 2 seconds to do that. So real quickly, before I introduce our guest, I am going to give the episode breakdown because we're going to talk about this really unique topic known as climate anxiety, and that it is a thing that people deal with. And if you're listening to this and this is not your thing, then I would just encourage you to just kind of bypass this episode. It's not for you, but this is something that people deal with, and as mental health practitioners, we're here to help people.
That's right.
And that's the whole point of this podcast, is to get information out in a different way, and maybe it'll be helpful to people. Also, like as part of that, as we always say, like check out the show notes or the description of the video. We try to put lots of links in there, but there's going to be more links. There usually are more links that I put on the podcast version or the re-upload to YouTube than there will be right now on the live version. So if you're watching this live, you come back and check later, and there should be some more links up there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so on the episode breakdown, we are going to first just kind of define what climate anxiety, what is it to begin with, then move into the psychological impact from climate anxiety and the emotional stress that it can create. Environmental stress. We're going to talk about therapeutic tools for managing. My notes, I have eco-anxiety. And then fostering hope and resilience for it and what that looks like. And so that's what we're going to do.
Good. Sounds good.
Yeah. And my special guest to talk about this is one of our counselors here at Family Solutions, which is Mary Scruggs, who's an LMFT, and she's a certified partner trauma therapist, which kind of falls in the betrayal trauma realm. But this is kind of outside of that a little bit. This is a very unique field right now, from my understanding of treatment. And so she is the one that really brought it to our attention, and so that's why I thought she'd be the perfect person for having on the show today. So Mary, welcome to Therapist Take.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. I appreciate you providing us some books and resources. Mm-hmm. And I noticed you got yours kind of earmarked over there.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I have it here.
Right. So to begin with, like, How did how did you stumble onto this form of treatment?
Okay, so, I think like it's funny just becoming a therapist, like always the journey of what we think it will be in what, like the reason I became a therapist is no longer the reason I am a therapist. There's different reasons I'm a therapist. And then now that I'm getting more interested in specializations, it's like, there's no telling what I'm going to be specialized in 10 years because I just kind of find my way there.
Right.
But I think that in working with climate anxiety, it's kind of started with like a personal journey, of experiencing climate anxiety myself and coachings with that. And then I have to say, like, a lot of the influence has come from my sister who works a lot with, I guess I would just say like people who are impacted by climate change. She's worked with farmers and she's done a lot of work. She's worked in other countries,
Is she a therapist too?
She's not a therapist, but she did study anthropology. So it's funny. We both
okay.
grew up studying people,
Right.
Anyway, so and she's 8 years older than I am. So I feel like every so often I hit a milestone. I'm like, oh, that's what Sarah meant when she said that to me. That's my older sister. So that's kind of my journey of just like my personal journey getting here. And then the more I read, the more I'm realizing that we don't have a ton of mental health clinicians, especially just in the area we live, who are actually trained to work with this directly, because it is one of those things where it's like you kind of get it or you don't, I think. So, you talking about David, who you saw last week?
You're right. Yeah, the
Yeah.
polygraph examiner.
Yeah, talking about him coming back, I'm kind of like, this will probably be something that I come back and talk to you guys more about at some point, because
great.
I'm I feel early on in my journey of figuring out, like, what does it mean for me as a mental health clinician to work with people with climate anxiety? So,
Right.
yeah.
When you say David, by the way, we always have to clarify. We have a lot of Davids in our
do
life
you?
for some reason. Probably out of all the names,
are
it
a
seems
lot of
like
Davids.
So
it's
previous
so
episode,
David, our
David?
landlord, David, our accountant, David, our therapist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Davids.
Well, then people will just have to go through and watch all the videos of.
David, the polygraph examiner.
David Otwell. There it is. We just have to.
Or
David
we can say
O.
Otwell.
Yeah, we could add his.
We could use his last
But
name.
it's more fun. Make it a mystery.
I like the
Yeah.
nicknames. David, the polygraph examiner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, the polygraph examiner, Otwell. That's how we introduce
I'm
him.
all about a good scavenger hunt,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did notice, like, I don't know if I've ever really asked you about this, but your Instagram handle is anxious, like the
anxious
therapist. You're
therapist.
anxious therapist, right? And you kind of remind me. I think there's a guy's like the angry therapist is a
Oh, I don't know.
kind
if
of a
I've
social media influencer.
seen that
and-
person.
But anyways, I was just Instagram handle is your anxious therapist. Like, is anxiety kind of just something you've been interested in anyways as a practitioner?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I experience, and I don't really shy away from sharing that because I'm human, right? And so I kind of just try to embrace it to a degree of, I think, humanizing me with my clients and also here are tools that are helpful for not just you, but also I'm your climate anxious therapist.
Okay, right. It was the narcoleptic therapist.
There you go.
Because a lot of people listening to this probably doesn't know that about me, but I'm like, that could work against me. I think. Like,
Have you done a podcast on that?
I know.
Not yet, in a way like where like Carrie was interviewing me or something. But I don't really. I would if somebody was having trouble managing their narcolepsy. I would be happy to help them work a plan and everything like that. But I don't think to date I've ever had anybody come in for that reason. So to be able how to go about treating it and everything, like from a clinical perspective, I don't think would be I could speak to, but I could definitely speak from personal experience what it's like to have it and how I've gone about managing it.
Yeah.
But I think from a practical standpoint, I'm like, I don't want people thinking they're going to come in and I'm going to fall asleep while they're in session either, so because I have it pretty bad, apparently.
Apparently.
My new sleep study just told me so.
Oh.
Yeah. But I have a system. I have systems, I guess, for managing it. But,
Like all
Which is
anxiety
necessary.
treatment.
which is
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
right, like all, I mean, just about anything we have, right? We have
Yes.
to create those
You
systems.
have to work with yourself
Right.
and not just pretend it's not there. Not pretend.
Which is what I think is kind of what this whole thing is about.
Right.
This is happening. But I'm
Right.
just curious, what does it look like for the clients that are coming in with this? Like, because I'm sure this wasn't like you had already, kind of an idea of this is what will mean that
Yeah.
my clients are struggling with this and this is what I'll do. It was probably something that you just started kind of noticing happening. Maybe, you said maybe with you became more aware of just
Yeah.
the nature of it, but then you started using it at work too.
Yeah, so I've had clients where they don't come in for that reason, but it comes up in our clinical work. And then I think I found myself being at a point where I was like, I don't know what to say because personally, like I'm also feeling kind of anxious about this. And I think that's where, and I've seen this path within myself and I've seen it in people around me where I think if you are someone who does start to feel afraid of what climate change can mean, because nothing's guaranteed, right? Like we don't know 100% what the future is going to look like with anything.
Sure.
But when people first start to really be afraid of it, I think it starts off very big and scary, very dreadful. It starts off with, if I don't see it, it's not happening. So I'm just not going to talk about it. And I think I was kind of in that place at one point. So when clients were coming to me talking about it, I was like, oh no, you're making me have to think about this. But then as you go through that process, and it's a lot like grief, like, okay, if I actually embrace it and face it for what it is, it brings me a sense of calm and a desire to focus on what's within my control. And so I think like it can start off really big and scary, and then it turns into, okay, well, what can I do with what I'm working with? And I actually think it's similar to betrayal trauma in some ways where, like, I think like what we talk about with clients often is, you cannot 100% trust anyone in the world, right? No person is ever to be 100% trusted, but we're not sitting here thinking about that on a daily basis because why would I? Why would I constantly think, I don't know.
Right.
But then when you feel betrayed, it's that piece of evidence of reality that, oh, even the person I did trust the most actually is someone who can hurt me. And I think that that's similar in this anxiety of like, oh, I don't actually know what the future holds. And that's, for better or for worse,
It's the
right?
uncertainty
Sure,
of it.
sure.
Right.
Yeah, like there's
Yeah.
hope in that too, right? Of
Yeah.
like, just because it seems scary doesn't mean it will be.
Right.
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 Doesn't mean
So,
it won't.
Good-
before we
good
go
comparison.
Before we go deeper into that, let's just go ahead and define it so we make sure that, I mean, I know it's easy to kind of assume what we think it is just
Yeah.
by the title of it, but
Yeah.
just to make sure, let's go ahead and talk about what
Can I
exactly
pull out my
is.
book?
Yeah, please.
So I don't use my own
So
words
this is
and
from
butcher it.
this is from the book Generational
Generation Dread.
which
Yeah.
we have
Finding purpose in an age of climate anxiety.
right. Okay, and if we put that graphic up to you real quickly, we can
You mean
show
mine's
the
not good?
yeah. It'll be easier
I
to
can't
see.
actually see if it's in the camera or not though.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, there will be a link to this as well in the show notes in called Generational Dread, and so you're gonna read
Yes.
their definition.
Yes. So they said, the most prevalent description of eco-anxiety is defined by the American Psychological Association as the chronic fear of environmental doom. And then she goes on to say, like, I would suggest that eco-anxiety is merely a sign of attachment to the world. And she gives like a few more, I really do recommend this book. She gives a few more breakdowns of kind of descriptive words of what people might feel. Like she even says here, most often though in the day-to-day, we just call these feelings by their right names: fear, terror, anxiety, depression, despair, overwhelm, stress, worry, sadness, rage, grief, guilt, heartbreak, and dread. So I think that
Okay.
kind of sums it up.
So what is it? Is there some kind of trigger for it? Usually, you were talking about like betrayal trauma and how that is that type of anxiety that comes from that is triggered by a betrayal, right? Like a demons to people when, like, I think is it one thing to just like I'm aware of climate change. I'm aware that we need to take care of the planet, but what happens to somebody when it turns into this where I'm really having a hard time managing my feelings?
What triggers that is your question?
Yeah, I mean, or is there an
Yeah.
event, or is it just kind of a gradual thing?
Well,
or-
I think that there's a lot of grief that is experienced, and that's something else she kind of talks about too, where, as we talk about, it's not just 1, 2, 3, my grief is dealt with, I've mourned the loss, I'm okay. It just comes and goes as life happens. So I think a lot of that can be influenced by, it could be politics, it could be news of like, oh, this species is going extinct now. It can be, and there's so many different ways on how people think we should be approaching climate change. And so I think oftentimes if you have one idea in your head of this is what we should be doing to deal with climate change, but then you see maybe leaders not taking that path, you're going to feel some betrayal in that. And I think that can bring on that dread, that fear and panic of like, oh no, this person's not doing what I think is supposed to be the best route. I'm now grieving that, I think is what can trigger it. The big feelings, at least.
Okay. Yeah, it's like there's an asteroid headed for the planet type thing, and nobody's doing anything.
Yeah, like Don't Look Up, Adam McKay's book.
Oh, really? Right.
Or movie. Yeah.
Right.
So
Forgot about that.
I think
That's
also,
probably,
also just like natural, the disasters we see in the fires in California. And I think also the world we live in, we see it firsthand. Not quite to the degree that we're there, but almost,
Right.
The extreme weather events are not abnormal. They are very, very typical.
They're very typical, and we see them live.
Yes.
So that can be scary.
Yeah, I was listening to what's his name, Neil deGrasse.
Tyson.
Which one? Which name's first?
Neil
Neil
deGrasse Tyson.
No, okay, I always get it mixed up. But which I think he's really fun to listen to, and and he was talking about something related to Mars or something, trying to change certain things, and he's talking to some pundit who's asking, or talking about certain things that might happen to the environment, like the sun. Like when the sun burns out or things like that. And he was talking about something like, he's like, that doesn't even scare me. He goes, I'm not, he's like, I'm not really even worried about that. He goes, what really worries me is, and he talked about something that's like not going to happen for like 5 billion years, And he's like, this one really, and is like, and the person's like, why? He's like, because this one's only like 5 million years away, but this is 5 billion. Like, it's just so funny to kind of think about like the thing that, is 5 billion years away, is really, alarming to him. But, when we just think about the sun, for example, that we don't get to have the sun forever, and yes, like, we're going to be, long gone, and probably, any remnants of our lineage long gone by the time that happens. Like, I still kind of feel like that we should be like thinking about that now. You know what I mean? Because I'm glad I'm not going to be the generation that lives on this planet when the sun burns out.
Right.
Like how terrifying for the future, for whatever generation that is. Right. And we can just, we can kind of take, have some peace in knowing, well, it's not going to be me alive, or my kids or grandkids or anybody that I know. But I kind of think that we should be thinking about, that our planet is a living, breathing organism. Some of the things that makes it operate are also, in a way, a living. The sun definitely is. I think it's more of a consumer than it is a giver. It's a giver of light, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's you know what I mean. Like, so I don't know exactly where I was going with that, other than, maybe we should all stand to have a little anxiety about, our planet and the future of our planet, even if you think that this stuff isn't going to affect you in your lifetime or in generations past you, like, we could stand to have a little bit of concern and worry about that.
Yeah, and I think, like, the challenge with that is there's a lot of, if you look at a lot of the graphs, like, climate change is impacting people now. And I think, like, I know you kind of put in our outline today, talk about who it impacts the most. And I think from what this book is talking about, a lot of it is younger generations and people in maybe like oppressed societies who experience the effects much more directly because they are in environments where the disasters are very much so prevalent for them. I think too, research is also showing that, like, this could impact us even more so in the next 20 years. Right. This is our lifetime and our children's. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the questions that come up when people do have eco-anxiety, climate anxiety, I think they're kind of interchangeable, is like, should I have children? Does that feel wrong? If I believe like it will impact us in 20 years, like does that feel wrong? Or is it worth it? You know? And so, and of course, like that's on a person by person basis, but
Sure.
I have read a lot of even like climate scientists, like the people who are in the trenches essentially, they have children. Many of them do. And so I read this one interview, I can't remember who it was by, I wish I had it, but he was kind of like, I noticed that a lot of these people had kids, like what's the deal with that? And someone was like, kids give us hope, you know, they give us something to work toward. And I mean, that's very true. Like
Yes.
I was motivated by things before my child, but now that I have my child, I'm like, oh, everything is for her.
Right. Yeah,
So.
but I even think people without children can still find hope in children, right? And knowing that, you know, these young people will carry things on after me,
Yeah.
you know. I do, I think like, you know, there's this, kind of what I was getting at was that, you know, it's we can quote research all day long, you know, and some people are going to believe it no matter. I mean, we've been trying to do this with talking about spanking for since the 50s, right? I mean, we got now nearly, I think, 70 years of research that, you know, that says it just doesn't help. Like,
Yeah.
in some cases it's harmful, but at minimum it definitely isn't helping. You know, but yet people will hold fast to their beliefs on certain things for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that some people are really going to value what the research is saying and take it for what it is, and they're very science minded, and there's just some people that just aren't. And I'm kind of speaking to those people and saying like that, even if you don't believe it and you don't think it, like it could kind of behoove us to I think we could all agree, for the most part. I know there's some extremists out there that really don't think, you know, you don't need to take care of the planet, you know, but like I think we all agree that we want to kind of set up the generations ahead of us. I mean, I guess, you know, below us, you know, that are going to be there after we're gone, you know, to succeed and make it a little bit easier for them to set those generations up after that. So kind of, you know, all of us kind of paying a little bit more attention
Yeah.
to that might be a little helpful.
Yeah.
Might be helpful.
Yeah.
But I was kind of, where I was going with that is kind of like, you know, with the people you're working with or people dealing with this, is how much of this climate anxiety also has to deal with feeling alone in it, in that there are, you know, a good number of people that don't believe it, you know. And so how do I, you know, not only do I feel it, but like, you know, whether it could be someone as close to me as my spouse, could be my mom or my dad, or you know, friends, or you know, a larger community that doesn't that thinks I'm silly, or I'm afraid that's what they would think, is I'm just silly for feeling the way I feel.
Well, and sometimes it's like the extreme opposite too, where it's like, okay, well, you're silly for thinking there's hope. You know, or you're silly for even having hope that we can do anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't feel very good either.
Helplessness on
Right.
both sides.
Yeah. And I think like, again, nothing is 100% guaranteed in life, but without hope, we just have dread, and that's exhausting, right? Like, why would I do anything in my life if that's all I'm feeling? I had another point and I lost it. It left my brain, but yeah, I don't know. It's gone.
Let's all
That went
stare
away.
at Mary.
Until it comes
It
back.
will come back, and it'll, while someone's
Stare at
talking,
it
and then I'll be
long
like,
enough.
I'm sure us staring at you and
It'll
waiting
make
for
it
you
happen.
to. We'll wait.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's right there too, and then it goes away.
Well, so to that point though, what you're saying, you know, is like, you know, probably more so than I mean, everything is like this to some degree, but I think when it comes to the climate and taking care of the planet and things like that, and making a difference, man, it really is a collective effort, right? I mean, one person recycling isn't really going to do much.
No.
Right. So when you're working with the individual who is dealing with climate anxiety, I mean, I can see how that, like, what am I
Like,
gonna
what?
do?
Yeah. What?
You know, like,
What am I supposed
so
to do? I'm
what
one
do,
person.
so what does the therapist do with that? I mean, what is the
Yeah.
approach there?
Yeah. I think first of all, like as therapists, what we can do best is validate, right? Like, of course that feels scary.
Right.
Even if a therapist doesn't agree with it, they can still say like that feels scary,
Yeah.
right? Like that, of course that's a scary thing. Kind of like again, working with betrayal trauma. I really do see a lot of parallels when I think about
interested in that.
climate
Yeah.
anxiety. Yeah. Just like of course you feel gaslit, crazy, whatever. Like those words are that people say in our offices. It's like, yeah, if that happened to me or if I thought that way, I would feel pretty bad too.
Yeah.
So I think first of all, it's just validating. Like even she has a whole page where she goes, it makes sense to be scared if you read this in the news. It totally is warranted if you feel this way. And I was like, man, just reading the way her buzzwords in that feels good. And I was thinking too, like, that's something that I need to remember is like, first of all, sometimes people just want to be validated, you know,
yeah.
as simple as it sounds, that's what we want.
Yeah. It's real for me.
Yeah.
You
And
know, like,
I did read a good article from Dan Siegel, and he was talking about how, you know, and as systemic therapists, we always think about how we exist in the context of our relationships, right? Like we are not people without other people. And so he kind of talks about how I think a lot of times we just think about ourselves and like self work, but we have to remember that self work also includes working on relationships, working on our environments and the people around us. And I think that that's kind of the issue sometimes at hand is like, especially if we're in survival mode, we're just like, what do I need to get through, or what does my family need to get through and survive? But it's like you kind of need the whole environment around you to be good for you to be good too.
Yeah.
right. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're, you know, like if your thing that you know creates anxiety is going to be seen as going at minimum be dismissed, but at most be criticized and ridiculed. Like that makes your problem threatening to your existence in that
In your
group, right?
relationships, yeah.
And we all know we need groups to. That's kind of what you were reflecting on. We need groups to survive, right? We need to belong. You know, that's why if you ever deal with a sense of or a fear of not belonging, I think that is embedded in all of us to some degree. You know, and so like if your belonging is threatened because of this thing you deal with, but who I'm supposed to ask my group? That's why my group exists to help.
Yeah.
But I can't ask them for help because the thing I'm asking for help for might be so threatening to them that they kick me out of the group. You know, so I just stay quiet about it, keep it to
Right.
myself.
I mean, that's like in systems when we think about like what are the rules and roles and boundaries and like we're kind of just playing the game to survive sometimes. But
Yeah.
when there's new information, it feels scary, even if it's not necessarily bad information, but it's new information,
Right.
and that's scary.
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can make you kind of wary. And if you're already feeling overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen any or made any like race correlations? Like, so I'm gonna let you go out on a limb and try to explain what I mean here, and hopefully I don't butcher it. But like when it comes to being validated, right? You know, ever since like the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, like kind of it's been on my mind and kind of thinking about it, just kind of stepping back and watching how the world is kind of responding, whether you're supporting or you're defensive, or and then kind of watching how other ethnicities are also responding to what it's like being a minority, what it's like being repressed, and it's different for everybody. I really kind of spent some time thinking about, as a white person, what I don't really feel like that other races want us to feel, or in largely, I'm not saying there aren't some extremists out there, but don't want us to feel shameful about being white. So what do they want? And I think, and it goes back to validation. Like, I think it would just be nice to be believed. Like even if you I don't think we can understand it. So like when we're relating this to like climate anxiety, like if you're someone who one doesn't struggle with this, or two, you don't even believe it's a thing. Is it not okay to believe that it's it's real for some people, even if you don't buy into the research and the science and or whatever. You know, like you, I can look at someone like Mary and realize that crazy does not fit the bill. So if you are telling me something's real for you, like I can believe it's real for you. It's not something that I deal with, but it's real for you. And then that's why I was like, it's like saying, are there any like kind of crossover to kind of like what it's like? Sorry, my phone is ringing. You know, a crossover to like in kind of how I've thought about race relations. You know, is like sometimes you know, like we don't have to get it because we're not going to get it. You know, you can't make yourself get it. You know, but what we can do, and this is kind of influenced by Brene Brown.
I was just thinking about her.
Right, and
Yeah.
how she kind of, you know, her take on empathy.
Yeah.
You know, and basically saying empathy isn't how we've always thought about it. Of like, I need to take the lenses off of which I see the world and then put your lenses on so I can see the world through your eyes. She's like, it's impossible because you only have your lens. Like, so you can't do it. So what is empathy? And she's like, it's believing people. It's just believing it's real for them, you know? And so that's kind of what I was getting at with that. That was kind of a long route there. So
Yeah. Like I keep bringing up betrayal trauma. Surprise! I don't know if you guys expected that, but I think of it too as like, you know, oftentimes if I have a client who has felt betrayed by their partner, I often am telling the partner who, you know, did the acting out, like, this is not new information for you, but this is new information for them. So it's almost like it just happened. So even though this is like a secret that you've had for years, this is new information to them, and they're having to understand and wrap their heads around that. And you kind of just need to believe that it's hard to hear, and it you know, it's hurtful. And so, because if it's the other way around, where it's just like, I think you kind of just need to get over it because it's not happening anymore. It's like, okay, but I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that it even happened.
Right.
You know, that's
Right.
hard.
It's not helpful. So is climate anxiety for you and the work that you've done with clients, is it so much about that you're having clients that are feeling the anxiety of what it means that, you know, things are changing and there's scary risks? Are they suffering because people don't believe in the risk, or are they suffering just because they're aware of the risks? Is there one of those that you notice more than the
Yes.
other? Okay.
Yeah, I think like I've seen it more with younger clients, you know, like younger adults who are asking questions of, do I have children? What is my responsibility? Should I like be recycling and doing this? Like, what's within my control? But then also feeling every once in a while it can just hit you of like, this is too much. Like, I think what you were saying, Josh, like, I'm one person. What is the point in me doing any of this? That's, you know, it doesn't feel like it's much. So I think I've seen a lot of that and just like overarching questions of what choices should I make for my future at this point in time. That's mostly where I've
Mostly
seen
what
it.
it's coming into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, just because we are in Oklahoma, I think I've had more people who have felt kind of isolated of like being surrounded by family members and loved ones where they're like, I don't feel understood because I don't know if they agree.
So a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how do you help especially the people that are trying to make big life choices, right? Like recycling is a choice, but to have children or not, to, you know, buy or own property or things, or, you know, deciding to be vegan, that's a big choice and commitment. Like those are big things. So, I mean, how do you find yourself helping people through those?
Yeah, I feel like I like to remind people of like, you don't have to make a big decision today, right? Like you have time. And, you know, even just when I try to talk to clients about like working out, it's like, okay, if you tell yourself you're going to go in for 3 hours every day for 5 days, that's going to last a week. You know, you're not going to, that's not sustainable. If that,
you are very optimistic.
Yeah, and so I think it's like, okay, what's within your control and what are small changes you can make? And also looking at the resources that do have positivity. So like if you're on Instagram a lot, what is something positive you can follow with climate change? Or if you know, like to listen to podcasts, what is something that's going to help you feel like there's something you can actually do rather than just be like, you know, we're all going down.
Doom and gloom,
Yes. And so I think I try to reframe it of like, again, just what's within your control, and nothing has to be decided today. You can think about what are the first few small changes I can make. And I think that can go a long way.
And that's kind of the initial like when someone first comes in, this is kind of some of the things you would do.
And I do want to say, like, I don't feel quite like an expert in this. I still feel like I'm at the beginning of figuring out the best way to
Right.
approach clients when it comes to climate anxiety. Like, I'm wanting to do more reading and research
Right.
with that.
So on that note, like for everybody to know, like you are not officially trained in or certified in
Correct.
climate anxiety treatment, which I think is
I want to, though.
There is that, right?
Yes.
There's that, and so. But I also think too, like my guess is that there aren't hardly anybody. I don't know any therapist. In fact, I didn't even know that you could get certified in it until you told me about it. So on that note, like you're as expert on it as anybody I would know
Yeah.
on it. So if somebody were to call
Yeah.
in here wanting to deal with this, it's like Mary's the
Mary.
one. But I am glad that you're taking it upon yourself to get that training. Is that still you still doing that?
Yeah, I got accepted to the program, and it'll start in the fall. So
Awesome.
Good.
Awesome. So we'll have to have you back to talk.
when I
kind
know
of
more of what I'm talking
what
about, I'll be
your
like, forget everything I said. Here's actually what you should do.
But so kind of what I was getting at though is like that's your initial approach. But like, do you have in your mind like kind of where you're headed? Like when someone comes in for betrayal trauma work, for example, right? We know we got to do some crisis management, and that's kind of what you're talking about. Like we got to help kind of. Get the dust to settle, instead of, or whatever's stirring the dust up to get rid of that so it can settle
Yeah.
and people can come up for air. The problem isn't gone. But we also know, like, we've talked about this with like sex addiction treatment that, after a short period of time, we're hardly talking about sex at all.
Right.
At a certain, and we're talking
Yeah.
about trauma, and we're talking, we're taking a deep dive. So, is that where you anticipate, when it comes to climate anxiety, that you will be headed, is into like what is the thing that is really making it difficult to manage this, level
Yeah.
of uncertainty?
I kind of see it as like a mix of grief work, anxiety work, betrayal trauma is how I view it a little bit of like if someone comes in because they had a family member die, I don't have the perfect words. All I can say is, yeah, that happened and this is hard.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
there is no perfect magical thing I can say to that. And so sometimes, when we go seeking therapy, it really is sort of just that desire of I want someone to see me and see this pain. And so I think that that's kind of my initial approach. If someone comes in for specifically climate anxiety, I would just be like, yeah, this is scary.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I just want to know.
I didn't know if there
like,
was another part to that I missed.
and what I want to be careful of saying is, or people hearing this, is suggesting in any way that when I said sex addiction, I think one thing we often would say, sex addiction isn't about sex. It's about a lot of other things. I don't want people to hear me saying that climate anxiety really isn't about climate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But what I was wondering though is of like, it's really like, well, how do I acknowledge it and do the things I can control and life still be manageable,
Yeah.
right? And so that's probably, I would guess, as a therapist, kind of where you're headed is trying to figure out like what is going on for you that is making it feel so unmanageable, which I would imagine has something to do with the feeling of uncertainty and
Yeah.
helplessness and
Yeah.
feeling alone and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, like Dan Siegel even talks about in the same interview I had read where, he's like, it's fight, flight, or freeze. What are we going to do at first? It's crisis management. And then once we get that settled, like any therapeutic work, it's okay, let's dig deeper. Like, what does this mean to you? Why is this something that feels so fearful for you? Because something that's scary for me can also be scary for you, but maybe for different reasons.
Yeah, that's true.
So Dan Siegel writes about this too?
Oh, yeah. He does a lot of
Really?
work with mental health and climate
I mean, I know
change,
you
yeah.
mentioned him earlier, but I just thought you were referencing him from something else.
Yeah.
But
No,
he writes directly.
When I've tried to do, the little research that I have of trying to actually do the mental health approach, he has a lot of stuff on it.
Good.
Oh, cool. That's
Yeah.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
You have a kid's book too, right?
I do.
Is that's not a Dan Siegel book then?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, climate change for babies. I don't mean this to be like a condescending thing. It's just that I study behavioral sciences. I'm
Yeah.
not this type of scientist.
Environmental
Yes.
science,
And
yeah.
so I'm like, so anything that feels confusing, I'm like, please explain it to me like I'm 6, but then this is the best way. Because I'm like, this is for babies, right? Like I can read this to my kid and she's like, oh, I love reading about the earth. She's like, that's a circle.
Right.
The earth
But
is
the
round.
intent isn't
Earth
to
is
stress them out early.
No,
The intent
no.
is to help
Even at the end.
them understand what's going on.
It says
right?
it says
Right.
what can be done.
Wow.
Yeah,
It still
yeah,
gives
yeah.
you like an idea of like here's some things you can do within your control. And so when I read this to my daughter, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
That's what we're
I can do
doing.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like that baby books are those really thick pages.
I know.
You know, makes you feel like you get a lot of traction.
Well, yeah, they hold up.
Yes. For the most part, it is amazing the books my daughter has torn up. Though I'm like, how did you do that?
Wow. I
I
know.
remember when my kid was little and we're reading these books, I was like, man, we're knocking out like 3 or 4 books a day. I was like, man, you're going to be so disappointed when you get older.
I know.
It
Don't
takes you-
read at that rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes you 3 weeks to get through a book.
I
Yeah.
know.
It's fun. They have a lot now where it's like classic literature. I'm like, ooh, I get to see her advance through this. Like, here's Little
Yeah.
Women, and it's just a counting book.
Yeah.
And then one day it'll be the whole book.
Good.
By the way, I just thought about something. I'm like, when I say 3 or 4 books a day, I meant like in a setting. Like it,
Oh, yeah, 'cause you have to
could knock
reread
out a
them.
whole lot more. I don't want someone to think that, man,
Josh.
Josh is a slow
Your
reader.
perspective here. Yeah. That's funny.
3 or 4 kids books a day, man.
Yeah.
You're a slow reader. Well, it's really interesting, Mary.
It is interesting.
I think, one question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is like, I know that you're just now kind of starting the process for yourself of getting the expertise that would make you feel more comfortable in saying you're an expert. But like, just sort of like where you are right now in it, like what, if for someone that's listening to this, it's like, oh, this is a thing. Like I'm so glad I stumbled onto this. Like what is the thing you would want, someone to know that's listening to this that might be dealing with just climate anxiety?
Yeah, I would say you're not alone. Like, even if, I don't know. What would I want them to know? Why does that feel like a hard question?
This is big.
There's so many
You could
things.
give me a call.
Set up a time. Yeah.
Well, I think
There's resources out there. Like, this book is calming. Like,
I don't think it has to be complicated. Like,
Yeah.
I think you're not alone.
You're not
That's because
alone.
that's what
Yeah,
I was
I mean,
thinking
sure.
you'd say is there are people writing books on this stuff.
Yeah.
Like you're
It's
you're
out there
not
for a
you're
reason.
also not you're not crazy.
Yeah, there's certifications for a reason.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Meaning a need.
Like, it's needed.
Yeah.
It's
And
needed,
so
yeah.
there's probably a Facebook group on it, I'm sure.
Oh, there's
I'm sure.
tons of resources out there, and
Yeah.
I think on my therapeutic page, I probably will try to work on sharing more stuff like that. Anyway, so here's a little foreshadowing.
Well, we could put something on our little TV ad out there.
Yeah,
Or our new
exactly.
TV we have in our waiting room.
Yeah, there's great resources out there. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, and it doesn't have to be completely invalidating. There's somewhere in between, which is like anything, right?
Yeah.
For any problems we have, there's something in between. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be all or nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
But yes, this book is great. I think it's a great and easy read and very to the point. And it does kind of feel similar to also working with like LGBTQ plus communities because, a lot of times they want an affirming therapist. And so I think it feels similar to that in a way where it's like I affirm and can validate that I agree that this is something that's happening. And so I think that that's kind of where I will sit here and say that. I'm comfortable saying that. And so if that's something that someone needs, like I can also still work with clients who don't necessarily feel a fear of that. I do,
Right.
Right.
But I do want to say, like, if someone is like, I don't want to see a therapist who doesn't believe it's real, that
Sure.
that
That's a
makes
good-
sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
That wouldn't
sense.
feel
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
You need to be seen
Yeah.
in the therapy room.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I really
It
hope
is.
that after you get going on your training, that we can get another episode planned.
Come
'cause I'd
teach
like
us.
to-
TBD.
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to
Yeah.
do. But yeah, I think that people listening to this that when we were talking about podcast guests, I was like, well, you should come talk about climate anxiety. Like,
And then I said, that makes me feel anxious. John.
yeah, we're gonna do an episode on podcast anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah,
eventually.
podcast
Yeah, that's what Carrie's treating these days because it's personal to her.
That's right. That's my
But look now, she's done like 50-something episodes, and she's fine.
fine.
She's fine, I think.
You don't ask.
And don't ask. Don't ask. I said don't ask, don't tell
I
for sure.
know.
And
I know.
I don't want to know if she's fine with podcast anxiety because I want her to keep doing the podcast.
Yeah. She's here. She's
That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what it
It's
boils
all
down
that
to.
matters, right?
Right. So, but yeah, I would love to follow up with you to kind of get what you're learning and for people listening to this that, it isn't, like you can have your personal beliefs and your personal thoughts on this stuff. It's not something you battle with. That's fine. Yeah. We're not here, to judge people on what is making life difficult for them.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of things that people deal with that come in our office that that they're embarrassed about, or they're scared. And I'm not saying you should be embarrassed about that. I shouldn't say you should be embarrassed about anything that you go to therapy for, but that is the reality. They're embarrassed, they're scared, they feel alone, they don't feel like anybody else gets it. And sometimes, it's the therapist is the first one to ever say, I get, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Like you're not crazy. You're not out of your mind, it makes sense to you. And that's what we got to figure out what's going on so we can help you, be able to, self-regulate,
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks
for
for
coming,
having
Mary.
me.
Come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
I love having you here on Friday.
I know.
It's like Mary's here on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
She actually
great.
wants to work.
All right. So, you're not working. This is play.
That's true. This is fun.
Yeah.
This is play. Yeah.
I get
Well-
to talk. People have to listen to me.
Now, did you
We
have
don't have
any?
to.
Did you? Well, I'm sorry. I can kind of bogart this thing sometimes, but like, what was like kind of your final thought on it all? Like, as
I love the the part that you read from the book about it's the reflection of being attached to the earth. And that just, I think, is the best way to summarize it, because no matter what you're pursuing, if you're pursuing mental health, whatever brings you to pursuing mental health, I think one of the key ways to access mental health is being connected to something bigger than you, and also feeling grounded to where you are, which that's the earth, right? When we look at what are the best ways to, regulate your nervous system, it's being outside, moving in the sunshine, interacting with people in nature, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
really the formula. And so, to me, when people are, feeling distress or grief around the way that the planet is changing and what we're losing, it's, to me, reflects that you do have this, and I think we do have this deep connection to our
Yeah.
home, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what sits with me, and I think kind of an attachment lens, first of all, just fits the way I see the world, but also I think is real intrinsic, right? And I think people really understand that. And so just to say, I don't even need to bring you, studies. Like when you go outside, and I can't grow some things in my yard like I used to grow because it's too hot now. There's too many extremes. That's sad. I'm not, can't connect in that way. And I think a lot of people can connect, can have had some similar kind of small experience with that. So
Yeah.
I think that's what struck me the most was that part when you read from that book.
Yeah.
Now, and to your point, Carrie, I think sometimes we often think of people that are kind of defensive toward things like this as being, kind of politically on the right wing, side of things, and and you might think of then there's certain stereotypes that go along with that, like farmers, for example. But I grew up on a farm, and I cannot tell you how many times farmers are worried about that it didn't get real cold this winter, and when it's not real cold, that it doesn't kill the bugs and the pests as well as it needs to, or it's gonna affect how the rain comes in. Or I've heard people talk about how the winter wasn't real cold in Colorado, and so the snow caps are melting
Right.
on the mountain, and because because they didn't get the right kind of snow, that so now they're in Colorado, they're experiencing a drought,
Yeah.
and it's like or we've never had temperatures like this ever, and we're always experiencing these
Breaking
things
news
related to
and-
climate change, and I think people just I think probably because of the how it's politically it got that political weight behind it. People
Yeah.
get real threatened by the word itself, but I've heard it my whole life.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been.
Yeah.
It just hasn't. I've just haven't heard the word climate change up until I was an adult.
Right. Right. I
and
think.
so.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit more in our face now, probably than
Sure.
like we always kind of knew about it, talked about it in school a little bit. But,
Right.
yeah, it's very much there and in our faces, and I think it's just unfortunate that, like, even if you didn't believe climate change was happening, you would still just want to take care of your home, I would think, right? Don't you want? It's more comfortable to live in a nice, clean, taken care of home.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
and really, it's more about like the, climate change kind of implies there's a larger thing at play here, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that growing up, I experienced some of the grown men in my life experiencing climate anxiety. Because they're worried about, if we don't get a good winter, then this is going to happen. If we don't get a
Right.
good rain, then this is going to happen. And it creates anxiety and fears. And what this season, how this season, I know seasons and climates are different, so I'm not trying to mix the two, but I'm just saying, but how this season is going to affect the next season, and that's climate anxiety.
Yeah.
In my view.
Yeah.
So-
Maybe they just don't know that.
Now you might re-educate me after you get trained in this. And be
Yeah,
like,
after
Josh,
I-
you're completely wrong.
Actually, let me help you.
Yeah, this is
you
what
know-
was really happening.
It's just kind of one of those things where it's like if there's a monster in my closet, I kind of don't want to see it because I'm scared to see it. But actually, if I open the door and look at that monster, I'm like, oh, it's not as big as I thought.
Yeah.
It's not as scary as I thought. If I actually know what the monster looks like, I know what I'm working with here. And I think that's kind of like the research with climate change. Is like, if you actually look at the research and see what it is, it's not, it doesn't feel like great, but it's also maybe not as scary as we need to think it is. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
if you ignore it, it doesn't make it not real.
That was like our encore because we were wrapping up.
You
and
were,
we did
I
a
know.
little bit of an encore
You
there,
did.
but I'll
Yeah.
make sure to put that in the little chapter section. I'll put encore.
Wait, what part is the encore? The whole conversation? that we
No,
just-
no, the how like in a concert and they're like, hey, we'll see you later, and everyone's like,
Oh, yeah.
Cheers
come
them back
back
on.
and-
Yeah, but which part was our encore?
oh, like because I was asking Carrie to kind of wrap it up
Oh,
with
yeah.
her deal, and then I'm like, and that got me thinking.
So we're just enjoying our conversation
Yeah,
and
it
we'll
just
get to
keeps
listen.
going.
Yeah. All right, well, we will wrap up now. Thank you for
Yeah.
being here.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
listening to me.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.